with stakeholders pursuant to its inquiry into youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. During our first and second public hearings, the committee heard from several government ministries and agencies responsible for developing and executing national labor policy and skills development programs. These included the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training, and the On-the-Job Training Program, YTEP, among others. Today's hearing is intended to allow the committee to hear directly from youth-led organizations and tertiary institutions on the challenges confronting young persons as they transition from education to the world of work. Members of the public are invited to submit their comments on the Parliament's social media platforms, YouTube channel ParlView, or via Facebook or X, formerly known as Twitter. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at TT-PARL Committees for real-time updates and highlights from committee meetings. I would now like to facilitate the introduction of the representatives who are present. So if I could please ask the representatives to introduce yourselves, starting please with the University of the West Indies.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Kathy Ann Lewis, Manager Careers, Co-Curricular and Community Engagement.
Good morning, everyone. Karen Wilson, Institutional Research Analyst and Planning Officer.
The University of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, everyone. Jason Stafford, Senior Manager, Student Support Services.
Good morning, everyone. Jeremy Williams, Manager, Academic Standards.
The University of the Southern Caribbean.
Good morning, all. I'm Northern Swaby-Robinson, Director of Institutional Research at USC. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sherri-Lyn Legall-Nelson, Dean Interim of the School of Business and Entrepreneurship at the University of the Southern Caribbean.
Thank you. The UWI Guild of Students.
Good morning, everyone. Joshua Jitta, Incoming President, University of the West Indies Guild of Students.
Good morning, everyone. Johanna Julian, the Secretary of the University of the West Indies Guild of Students.
Thank you. The Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors.
Madam Chair, esteemed members of the Joint Select Committee, everyone gathered here this morning. Good morning to you, Mishka Lynch, Acting President of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors.
Pleasant good morning, everyone. Will Williams, District Youth Development Officer at the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors. Thank you.
The Trinidad Youth Council.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Terry Ann Baker, the first Vice President of the Trinidad Youth Council.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Kendall Vincent, and I'm a trustee of the Trinidad Youth Council.
Okay, and last but certainly not least, the Tobago Youth Council, who is joining us virtually. Loud and clear.
Members of the committee, my name is Delano Jewfield, and I am the General Secretary of the Tobago Youth Council.
Okay, so I would now like to invite the committee members to introduce ourselves. I am the chairman of the committee, Desiree Murray, and to my left. And to my right.
Good morning, everyone. Michael Dowlath, member of the committee.
Good morning, everyone. Sean Sobers, member.
Okay, and please allow me to introduce the committee's support team. The committee is ably supported by the Secretary to the committee, Mr. Julian Ogilvie, to my immediate left, and Assistant Secretaries, Ms. Lorraine Barraza and Mr. Brian Lucio, and also a team of parliamentary research specialists. The inquiry of the objectives are 3 in number, namely 1, to identify key factors and conditions that are contributing to youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. 2, to assess the effectiveness of existing state policies, programs, and initiatives in reducing youth unemployment and underemployment rates. And 3, to examine the real and potential contribution of the private sector in facilitating higher labor force participation by young persons. If I could please ask now the representatives to give brief opening remarks, not exceeding 2 minutes, please. Starting with the University of the Southern Caribbean.
Good morning again. The University of the Southern Caribbean welcomes the opportunity to contribute to the work of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration as it examines the critical issue of youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. As a private faith-based institution that has served the Caribbean region for almost a century, USC is deeply committed to equipping young people with the knowledge, skills, and values necessary to become productive contributors to the economy and the communities in the region. USC currently serves approximately 3,000 students across 5 faculties: business and entrepreneurship, education and humanities, science, technology and allied health, social sciences, and theology and religion. They offer programs from the associate level through to the master's level. The university operates its main campus in Maracas, St. Joseph, Trinidad, with extension campuses in Tobago and San Fernando, along with satellite sites in Antigua, Barbados, Guyana, and St. Lucia, and maintains expanding online learning platform. This regional footprint positions USC as both a national and a Caribbean institution, with approximately 35% of its 2025 graduate class drawn from across the wider Caribbean. Guided by its Adventist educational philosophy of head, heart, and hand, which focuses on integrating intellectual development, character formation, and practical skills training, USC embeds workforce readiness into its academic programs through mandatory internship, clinical rotations, supervised practical, and field placement. The university has also taken concrete steps to support youth employment through the participation of the government's on-the-job training program, through which it has hosted 20 students since 2019 and retained 10 as permanent employees. With this, USC signals its commitment to continuously assist the committee in its deliberations and contribute to the development of policies that will meaningfully address youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, please, from the University of the West Indies.
Chair, members of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, administrative and technical officers, colleagues, and members of the viewing public. On behalf of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, I wish to express our sincere appreciation for this opportunity to contribute to this important inquiry into youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. This indeed is a matter of national importance and one that is closely aligned with the campus's commitment to strengthening graduate employability, supporting human capital development, and contributing meaningfully to national and regional development. The UE St. Augustine is represented today by members of 2 key offices that contribute to the conceptualization, operationalization, monitoring, and evaluation of the campus's approach to graduate employability. Through our respective mandates, we support both the development of students for the world of work and the systematic tracking and analysis of graduate outcomes. Our contribution today is therefore informed by evidence from our graduate research studies, employer feedback, career development initiatives, and ongoing engagement with faculties, administrative offices, industry partners, and the students themselves. At the campus level, our approach to employability is deliberately multi-stakeholder. It recognizes that graduate employment outcomes are not shaped by the university alone, but by the interaction among students and graduates, academic programs, student support services, employers, the state, and the wider labor market conditions. We therefore aim to support students not only through academic preparation, but also through career guidance, workplace readiness initiatives, exposure to employers and internships and placement opportunities, skills and competency development, and feedback mechanisms that allow us to better understand that transition from university to employment. We also recognize that employability is multifaceted. A graduate's chances of successful labor market entry are significantly improved when there is meaningful alignment among the key stakeholders involved: the state, industry, higher education institutions, and the young people themselves. In this regard, we commend this committee for adopting a harmonized approach that brings together these different perspectives, including through public engagement and the voices of the young persons gathered here and across our nation.
Thank you very much. I'll invite now the University of Trinidad and Tobago to make a brief opening statement.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. On behalf of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, my colleague and I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important national conversation on youth unemployment and underemployment. As a national university, UTT remains committed to supporting national development through the provision of accessible, industry-relevant education that prepares graduates for a seamless transition into the workplace. UTT sees its role as extending beyond the provision of academic qualifications and to producing work-ready graduates capable of contributing meaningfully to national development, innovation, and economic transformation. Central to our approach is the integration of practical and applied learning into our programs, and this includes internships and cooperative education arrangements, industry partnerships, career preparedness initiatives. Our approach also focuses on cultivating an entrepreneurial spirit through courses and activities embedded within our programs. We recognize the challenges many young people face in securing stable employment, particularly within a changing economic environment. And the feedback from our graduates highlight the importance of stronger collaboration between industry, higher education providers, and the state to expand structured work-integrated learning opportunities, strengthen labor market intelligence, and improve graduate transition pathways. And so UTT remains committed to expanding equitable access to tertiary education across Trinidad and Tobago, supporting underserved communities and ensuring that education remains aligned with national priorities and evolving workforce needs. And so we look forward to contributing constructively to today's session.
Thank you. The University of the West Indies Guild of Students.
Standing on the already established protocols, The Guild of Students at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, represents approximately 13,000 or over 13,000 registered students across all faculties, undergraduate and postgraduate, full-time and part-time, on campus and off campus. I speak to their collective experience of the education to work transition. I wish to thank the committee for the timely manner of this investigation, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this inquiry. It is submitted respectfully, the responses to the questions, and in the interest of evidence-based, student-centered policy advocacy for young people in Trinidad and Tobago. We look forward to the public hearing and welcome any requests for clarification or supplementary data. Thank you.
Thank you. Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors.
Thank you. Madam Chair, esteemed members of the Joint Select Committee, distinguished colleagues gathered here today, specially invited guests, and the viewing and listening public, good morning. My name is Sherri-Lyn, acting President of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors, and seated behind me is Mr. Will Williams, District Youth Development Officer. Today, together, we are gathered deeply honored to represent the voices, aspirations, and concerns of the youth of Trinidad and Tobago at this significant public hearing. The Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors, TTYA, is a national youth-led non-profit organization focused on empowering young people, strengthening leadership, and ensuring that the voices of young persons are represented in national development, founded on 12 August 2014. The organization serves youth between the ages of 10 to 35 across Trinidad and Tobago. We extend our sincerest gratitude to this distinguished committee for affording us the invaluable opportunity to contribute to this crucial national discourse surrounding youth unemployment and underemployment within our republic. This issue remains one of profound socio-economic importance, as it directly influences not only the stability and advancement of our young people, but also the sustainable development, productivity, and future of our nation. We are privileged to participate in these deliberations and look forward to contributing meaningful perspectives, constructive recommendation, and solutions-oriented dialogue in the interests of empowering young people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Trinidad Youth Council.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to sit before the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. The Trinidad Youth Council is a non-governmental organization that serves as an umbrella body comprising a membership of youth organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. We seek to represent youth voices in political, economic, and social spaces and highlight the current vulnerabilities of youth. Today's inquiry on youth unemployment and underemployment represents a much-needed conversation on youth vulnerability. The notion that youth development is not at the forefront of national conversations contributes to the rising level of hopelessness that youth experience today. Youth are not afterthoughts. They are pioneers, innovators, inventors, creatives, and they all deserve a space to thrive in society. Minimum wages continue to restrict youth and their ability to sustain a reasonable quality of life. The ability to live in decent accommodation, purchase a decent vehicle, and pay for basic necessities and still enjoy social activities is not a luxury. These are the basic needs of youth, and I would even go on to say it's the basic needs of any human being that is living within this world. And they, young people, are unable to meet even those standards. Youth unemployment and underemployment, not only affect finances, but it impacts every aspect of life. Dating conversations have shifted to $200 dates, and women no longer want children. Youth are living with their families longer, and most are unable to purchase a vehicle. Housing is completely out of their reach, with greed and a lack of regulation contributing heavily towards inaccessibility. Madam Chair, youth deserve this conversation and deserve to be considered in policy approaches and development. I fear that the disenfranchisement of youth only impedes development, creating a pool of untapped potential that is going to waste. We look forward to a fruitful conversation today and hope that it addresses all of the issues at hand. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Tobago Youth Council.
Body for young people in Tobago and serves as the platform through which the voices, concerns, and aspirations of Tobago's youth can be represented at both the local and national levels. Our organization works closely with youth groups, community organizations, schools, stakeholders across the island to advocate for policies, programs, and opportunities that support youth development and leadership and empowerment. The Council is deeply committed to ensuring that young people are not only heard, but actively involved in shaping the future of Tobago. Through advocacy, consultation, and community engagement, we seek to address the real challenges facing our youth while promoting greater participation in national development. One of the major concerns constantly raised by youth across the island is the issue of unemployment and underemployment employment opportunities. The Tobago Youth Council believes that several long-standing structural barriers continue to negatively impact youth employment opportunities on the island. Foremost among those is the limited diversification of Tobago's economy. Tobago remains heavily dependent on tourism and public sector employment, making opportunities vulnerable to economic downturns, seasonal changes, and fluctuations in state expenditure. This has significantly limited the availability of sustainable, year-round employment opportunities for all young people. Additionally, there continues to be a mismatch between the qualifications many young people pursue and the demand of the labor market. While many youth attain tertiary education, industry experiencing shortage often requires technical and specialized skills that are not significantly supported through existing training pathways. The Council also recognizes the limited growth of Tobago's private sector. Many businesses are micro or small enterprises with limited capacity to provide stable employment, competitive salaries, or opportunities for advancement. This often results in young people either migrating to Trinidad in search of opportunities or remaining unemployed or underemployed here at home. Further challenges include transportation and digital infrastructure limitations, particularly in rural communities such as Charlottesville and Speyside, where inconsistent transport schedules and internet access continues to hinder participation in remote work, digital entrepreneurship, and online training opportunities. Finally, many young people continue to face difficulties accessing employment because employers often prioritize experienced workers, creating a cycle where youth cannot gain experience because they are unable to secure opportunities in the first place. The Tobago Youth Council remains committed to advocating for practical, sustainable solutions that empower Tobago's young people and ensure that we are given opportunities to contribute meaningfully to the development and the future of our island and country at large. I thank you.
Okay, thank you all for those statements. Before we commence the questions, I'd just like to give everyone an idea of how we intend to proceed. We are aiming to finish at 12:30, which would give us about an hour and a half of questions. We have two distinct groups, the tertiary education institutions and the youth organizations. So what the committee has proposed is to focus our questions on the youth organizations at the start of the inquiry of today's hearing, and to give all the youth organizations a chance to be heard. And then the tertiary education institutions can follow with questions and maybe address some of the concerns that the youth organizations have raised. So I would also like, at this point, to make mention that given the fact that we have officials representing the University of the West Indies appearing as witnesses today, I'd like to declare that I am a senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies in ophthalmology, Faculty of Medical Sciences, and I'm therefore planning to leave any questions directed to the University of the West Indies to the other committee members to pose. Okay, so I would just like to remind officials to please direct questions and concerns through the chair and to activate your microphones on your devices when you are speaking, and then to remember to turn them off. We can now proceed with the hearing, starting with the first question from Member Dowlath.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to say good morning to everyone and welcome to this inquiry. In looking first at the UE Guild of Students submission, I saw in your contribution, you spoke about the soft skills mismatch, going beyond the academic qualifications, that there's a difference between the graduate as digital natives who are really au courant with all of the technology, and sometimes your employers or the workplace environment. And this has an effect on our graduates, whether they're going to an internship or they're going to a new job, in integrating into the job space. So I want, and this question could go to all of the youth organizations. I want you all to elaborate a little bit on the differences in the communication styles of the digital natives like yourself, and what you meet when you go out to an employer, a business place, or you have an internship. And secondly, I want you to tell us a little bit about how we can go about bridging that gap. All right, so the question is open.
Could we please start with an answer from the UWI Guild of Students?
Right. Thank you for the question, member. So to begin with the first part of the question regarding adaptation, what the expectation is between the student who graduates, so the digital native and the employer, you look at employers having a certain expectation that graduates may be more in tune to being aware of institutional or business-oriented processes. Having worked before I entered the university, I am aware that much of what you learn in the classroom in terms of curriculum and pedagogy, it doesn't always apply in terms of a business environment. They have certain processes that they may follow. The status quo is to be maintained more often than not. So for students, the adaptation, it seems rather unilateral. Based on the submission, the current policy frames that the entire burden of adjustment is on the young person or the digital native. Existing literature on the industry consistently shows that organizations may tend to fail in terms of adaptation when they try to maintain a status quo. If a youth digital native proposes a change to existing system within a business or institution, it may often go overlooked. Now, could you repeat the second part of your question, please?
Right. So I consider myself to be a digital dinosaur sometimes, with the kind of AI technology and things like that. So you go into a workplace and you meet a supervisor, you meet someone who is managing your workflows and things like that. And there's that gap because recently we got submissions from Ministry of Labor about graduates not coming to them in the workplace fully formed with all these soft skills in terms of office etiquette. And so there seems to be this kind of gap, mismatch with employers considering the graduates not fully formed in terms of especially the soft skills. Yes, they have their academic qualifications, but that aspect of it. So I don't know if it's a two-way chair. It might be a two-way street here in terms of the learning process. So it's the gap that exists. How do the young people see themselves? What do they recommend in terms of bridging the gap on the side of the youth, and also too, when you go into, as you indicated, you worked for a little bit before you went to tertiary, on the part of the employer. And that's why I'm saying it's a two-way street.
And I fully agree. It is a bilateral street, a two-way street, because you know, when you're at university, especially at UE, students tend to get tunnel vision. They focus primarily on academic work. UE is a research organization after all, so that type of depth in academia is expected. However, I want to commend that we have a Department of Student Services, or a Division of Student Services within the UE, the SSD. They have a lot of co-curricular engagement and different programs that are tailored towards soft skills, interviewing, practice, and these types of things that benefit the students. An issue on our part as students may often be that we do not engage. Now, many students may say that's a marketing issue, more often than not. I could agree to that to a certain extent, but again, when you're very, how to say, prioritizing your academia, you may often overlook marketing efforts. One thing my administration has taken into is student-led marketing. We have WhatsApp communities for over 6,000 UE students and so on that actively engage. So collaborating with the existing departments within the university, that is extremely important. If we could develop a system to collaborate with employers to see beyond that what they expect, that data is shared in certain forms to the Division of Student Services, but if the guild and the student body could be more in tune to what those expectations are, we would be able to better market what employers are looking for from graduates, apart from a degree.
Thank you. Through your chair, I would like to hear from the other youth organizations too, including Tobago, and the tertiary institutions can stand by too to chime in on this two-way street.
Maybe the youth ambassadors.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Dowlath, for the question. I do believe that, well, I myself, I work before I actually started going to tertiary education. I actually still work. And something that I've noticed through the employers is that, as you're saying, Dr. Dowlath, these soft skills that they need, I think it starts from both, well, I would say secondary, because I think primary might be a bit too immature for that. But secondary school, it starts from there because they don't necessarily have that more so mentorship, or in certain schools that is, because the different schools, more so the favored schools I would list them as, they more so have that program in place for them to gain that skill, whereas some schools would be at disadvantage. And I think it starts from the root, it starts from there before reaching into that workspace, because how can an employer expect one to be that ready when they just come out, and it comes from that secondary core? So that's what I will have to add to say to that.
The Trinidad Youth Council can have their opinion noted, followed by Tobago.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you, and thank you, Member, for the question. This issue, I would say, of soft skills, in our opinion as a team, is that the evaluation and value that is placed on soft skills rests solely on the employee that is coming into the organization to work. And at the root of the issue is the fact that these soft skills that are being evaluated too need to be updated to match the time of society today. And if we are also bringing the full matter into consideration, what we need to assess as well is whether or not employers are looking for replicas of themselves. If they are looking for junior versions of potential future managers who emulate them in every way, shape, and form. And this, in this society, in this generation, and the generation after me, definitely is tuned in to social networks and technology. And so a lot of skills that they they build over time can be seen in those spaces, and those spaces are not reflected in the workplace. So at times, when we look at communication at the very basic level, some managers may think that WhatsApp is unprofessional, whereas some young people see it as a professional space to have committee conversations. And when I say committee, I mean in the youth space, to have organization discussions and so on. So at the very root, it starts with the perception of what a soft skill is, how that soft skill can be valued, and where is the room for new soft skills that have been developed in this generation to also be valued and integrated. So in terms of the second part of the question, in terms of bridging that gap, at the very first step, coming into an entry-level position should be looked at almost like membership from an employer or a supervisor or manager. Understanding that this young person is coming into an organization without experience, there's an expectation that there's a learning curve, and that curve should be reasonable. So I really feel like it comes down to a manager being open-minded and communicating clearly to their potential employer, potential staff member, of the expectations, and also leaving grace and room for a different interpretation of that same thing. And as a last point, I would also argue that in the youth space, when we discuss soft skills, a lot of young people do not see these soft skills reflected in their managers, and they feel that the onus is on them to portray themselves as a perfect employee, and managers themselves do not reflect those same qualities. So that is a disconnect. It's discouraging, and it makes young people feel like the skills they've developed today are not valued. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Tobago, you have the floor.
These programs have to deal with internship component, and before that we have to deal with life skills, which speaks to the soft skills that member Dowlath would have asked about. It is needed, and I can say that it is something that a lot of young people, especially now, is a culture. It's something that they're not cultured into. So it is something that they need to really be trained with, or us as young people need to be trained in. In Tobago, I know most times young people get that opportunity through summer internships. Unfortunately, summer internships can only take and train only but a handful of persons. Yes, but in Tobago, we also have an extra layer through the YES program, which is the Youth Energized for Success. I know they usually go into secondary schools and other institutions to train persons on and young people on these different soft skills, whether it be communication and in the workplace and these different things. And I note the contribution from my colleague from the Tobago Youth Ambassadors Program. And I will say, I think having bodies like the YES program go into schools would be able to help, especially given that not all schools are properly staffed and resourced to add this additional component to it. So having organizations like that go into the schools would be able to help to bridge that that gap. But I do agree with Member Dowlath, through you, Chair, that it is a two-way street. Being someone who facilitates these sessions as well, as part of my employment, I do agree that it is a two-way street as we deal with the soft skills and the digital skills and bridging that gap. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I believe Member Roberts-Radgman had a follow-up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I mean, the floor would be open for any person to respond, but I wanted to respond to Ms. Baker because you actually took one of the questions I was going to follow up with. I was going to ask if you believe that local workplaces probably need to be modernized to be able to connect better with what we call digital native graduates, and then you touched on it, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. The question I have for you and any stakeholder as well, and then also Mr. Daniel, I would want you to also respond from the Tobago perspective. Given how traditional our workplaces are here, especially government entities, and given that the government, both the THA and central government, tend to be major employers across both islands, how do you see those workplaces doing their part to connect more with digital graduates. If we were supposed to go with the argument that the local workplaces need to modernize, because you're right when you mention things like the use of WhatsApp, it's way more efficient using Teams, Slack, all those methods. But in traditional workplaces, it's either a file going upstairs to an administrator or a formal email going out. And just a very small example, right? But how do you see us getting this across to traditional workplaces so they understand and also buy into the need to modernize in order to improve efficiency and, of course, connect with the younger employees?
Thank you, member, for that question. Chair, through you. Well, it all starts, again, at the root of the vision of those that lead us, whether or not there's an agenda to modernize the public service. So, in order for any modernization to take place in the public service, there must be, especially if it's at a large scale, there must be a procurement process. And most times in that procurement process, at the very baseline, small changes and improvements are not considered. So for example, even if we use today's committee meeting as an example, I mean, most of us here have our questions and our responses printed out, but the young people of today would have tried to perhaps outfit this desk with tablets or electronic devices so that we would be able to navigate it a bit more smoothly. Now, in a lot of cases where ministries and state entities do not have the finances to implement infrastructure like that, what can take place is changing the process of needing traditional means of communication and traditional ways of conveying information. So as you mentioned, needing a physical file to take it upstairs. If that process was digitalized in the first place, where the employee or maybe a public person needed to engage with that ministry, they had that avenue to use, thus eliminating that step. So it all comes into play, it all comes down to what is the vision for the public service? Do we want to modernize it? And if so, it doesn't start with just a few improvements here and there, it starts with an all-around vision to educate people about the use of technology and integrating it at the very client to ministry level, is what I would say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that answer, Minister Sobers. You had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to all present. So I've heard a lot of responses as it pertains to the public service not being as ready or okra with digitization and being able to accompany or accommodate actually the needs of younger persons getting involved in the public service. But I've not heard really anything about young persons assimilating into life in private sector organizations. Now, when I, as a practicing lawyer in my previous position, the majority of clients that I had would have been from private organizations. And I think the private organizations tend to run a bit faster because of who they liaise with, not only on a national or regional basis, but on a global basis as well. As young persons getting out there into the world of work, coming from varying university backgrounds, do you believe yourselves to be so poised to assimilate into private organizations as opposed to the public ones? And are there things that you've experienced with working with private organizations that you'd want to recommend that the state take on board to help assist you all?
Hello, the Tobago Youth Council.
To Member Sobers. I want to start by saying, and I also want to, in my contribution, touch on one of the questions posed by Member Roberts-Radgman. Member Sobers, as it pertains to Tobago, I would say that a majority of young people who seek employment, as it pertains to getting into the private sector, are somewhat ready. I wouldn't say it's a perfect thing, but it's somewhat ready. But as I stated before in my introduction, Tobago is particularly different because we are heavily employment is heavily based on the Tobago House of Assembly, and when we look at private sector, the private sector contributions to Tobago as it pertains to employment is not really there. And for the little private sector that we have, they have only recently started modernizing to the point where we could say, as young people, we reap the type of benefits that your question would have asked for. But I know of young people from Tobago, and not just young people, but we have middle-aged people as well, who would have moved to Trinidad and accessed the type of opportunities that you would have referenced in your question in Trinidad. So it's a particularly different for Tobago. And just bouncing off very quickly back to the question from Member Roberts-Radgman through you, Chair. I think my colleague did an excellent job in expressing everything I had to say. But one thing I will say, though, I emphasize the need for an all-round holistic approach. I believe that when it comes to modernizing the private sector, there must be a will and a priority to do so. But I will stand and say that I know as it pertains to communication in the private sector, it has modernized. You see the difference in different ministries making reels as opposed to the long, boring videos now. You realize, so it's more captivating and so on. So I want to say that it is something that can be done because it has been bearing fruit just in different arms. But I think now taking a more holistic approach will benefit us more. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you for those answers. What I am getting is we're talking about digitalization, but the soft skills also encompass things like compassion, communication, emotional intelligence. And the impression I get is that these are optional courses that are not necessarily being taken up by the student body because you're focusing on, getting your degree. So my question is, I suppose maybe to the tertiary institutions, is there room for making some of these courses compulsory with credits so that the student body has to access these courses that develop their soft skills and make them more work ready? Maybe we could start with the University of the West Indies and then University of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I think there's absolutely room to include courses that specifically focus on soft skills and competencies and how our students develop it. First, they must understand what these are and the spread of skills and competencies, because as you said, it's wide-ranging. We might only be looking at a small amount, but it's a vast list of skills and competencies. And so absolutely there's room for our students to understand the range of competencies and understand where they rest on the continuum in demonstrating that they have mastery of the competencies. Every program, and I suspect it's the same as each institution, is different in terms of the number of courses they must offer, the number of courses that are required by the different accreditation bodies. And so it may not always be feasible to have an entire course, but I know what we have done at the university and what we continue to do is through our office, we have opportunity. Of course, it's not mandatory for our students to access our competency dictionary, and so they can see that definition and the different levels. But we have taken it a step further in that our Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, they are requiring that each course specifically state what skills and competencies will the students be able to acquire having accessed and completed a particular program. And so if there's just a little more merging, and it comes from a strategic level as well, just to have that engagement between the faculties and, let's say, student services in this case, and also employers, because we receive a lot of feedback from employers that would say, these are the competencies that we are looking for. this is where your students rate in terms of how they are demonstrating these competencies. And so there's room absolutely for new courses, but there's also room to infuse the competencies in already existing programs.
Yes, I understand. And I'm sure you'll agree that normally assessment drives learning. So therefore, if you don't make it mandatory, or sometimes the students will not necessarily give it the same importance.
Absolutely.
But what about foundational courses?
Yes, there is room to make it a foundational course. I will agree with that, even if it's just not competencies, but a professional development course. Like we do have a co-curricular course in workplace protocol, but again, not required. So if we could have a required foundation course that addresses professional development, career development, workplace transition, that would be an excellent initiative.
Thank you. UTT?
Madam Chair, so first let me say that many of these things that we're calling soft skills are mapped, embedded in several programs across the university, and often are required by accreditors, especially for those programs that might require specialized accreditation. We do not have currently a system where we have compulsory soft skill courses for students. Like the experience with my colleague, we offer several opportunities for students to access these as part of the co-curricular programming, but the uptake, and it was funny when I heard some of the things. One of the things that I tell my staff and faculty at UTT, when I'm having these things, if I don't have merch, if I don't have food, the students are not coming. So we are actually right now in the midst of planning a series of activities around career preparedness, workshops on interviewing, the skills that would eventually culminate in a job fair. And we would invite hundreds of students that are about to graduate. If I don't have much, if I don't have food, it's sometimes embarrassing where you may invite external persons to do guest sessions and those kinds of things, and a few students show up. And so that's also part of the challenge. But we do not currently have some of these things as compulsory components of the programming, other than where it's embedded within specific courses as part of the core requirements.
Thank you. So the solution seems to be merch and incentives, but just incentives. And USC, do you have a different experience?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I listened to my colleagues, and I'm wholeheartedly happy that I'm with the University of the Southern Caribbean, because we focus on the head, the heart, and the hand. And one of the things that we encourage at the university is our work-study program. So our students are able to work within our varying offices, where they actually get to gain these soft skills that they need to go out into the world of work. And some of our foundational courses actually teach these soft skills. So for example, one of the classes that, while I'm the Director of Institutional Research, I do teach as an adjunct faculty in the School of Business, and one of the courses that I teach is business communication. And we look at, from entry into the workplace, we look at cultural diversity, looking at how do you interact with persons who are not of your culture? How do we ensure that what we say, what we do, don't embarrass your colleagues? You don't put yourself in a position to be embarrassed. We look at how do you get into the world of work. So we look at your job application. We have real life experiences where you apply for a job, you come, you do your interview, when you get into the job, how do you proceed? You have a presentation. How do you prepare for this presentation? How do you take the feedback and make it, how do you give constructive feedback, and how do you use that to push you a little bit further rather than take it as a dismissive feedback? We also look at, recently we've upgraded our course to include AI as a part of integrating it into the world of work. How do you use it? How do you ethically use it? And we have seen where I've had students who come back to me and say, Miss, we have taken what you've said. We've been able to successfully apply for jobs. We've been able to acquire summer jobs just from this particular course. The university promotes the whole career development, the career, we have career activities. And we recently had one, if it is possible, I would ask my colleague to speak about it, or recent career fair that we had for the School of Business.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm very excited about this, being interested in youth myself. You know, at the University of the Southern Caribbean, particularly, let me just talk, I'm in the capacity of the Dean of the School of Business and Entrepreneurship. All our students do internships, so they have to go out into the workplace. But I want to just draw the attention to the committee of some of the feedback that we've been having as I just tally on what my colleague was just sharing. The employers are stating more and more that they do want the students to come out ready. Now, you will think that traditional university learning that already focuses on internships, some programs would have it. We have group work where the students have to communicate with one another and produce work. All institutions probably do that. Students probably do presentations when they go to classes, so they learn how to speak and to address their own teachers and lecturers in the classroom on a regular basis. At the University of the Southern Caribbean, we have students working alongside their studies already, so the majority of our students work, at least in the School of Business. We just recently did a survey of our students. Over 60% of our students are working by the third year of school, so they already are in the workplace. But yet we are hearing the employers saying, we want to see some things more developed in them. Now, to answer that, at the School of Business and Entrepreneurship, we have actually just entered a mandatory course that is professionalism and career readiness. So that's apart from the other studies. So we actually had to redo the curriculum and actually listen to the employers. Here's what we're finding now. The employers are actually calling the university directly and saying, can you recommend students that you think have developed certain types of skill sets for us so we can slow down the process? So here's the private sector coming directly to the school to ask, can you recommend students who have already been developing some of these skills? We want to know that you certify them. We want to know that you can give them a pass. We want to know that you recommend them, and then we will speed up our processes. So we hear the employers are asking. They are saying, you know what, still the digital natives, the generations that are coming behind, we want them ready, and when they hit the workforce, be ready. What can you do at the university to get them more ready? So we are constantly having to adapt and constantly having to equip our young people who are coming into the workplace now to let them be ready and answering the call of the employers and the persons out there. Now, one of the ways we do it as well is that we partner. So in our internship programs, we partner with the private sector, so they take on our students. It helps them in the development of the soft skills that they may not pay attention to a lot when they may be in school. And then also we have a lot of guest lecturers, and what we do, we welcome. And we are grateful that the private sector and the public sector as well, they welcome invitations to come and speak to the students. So you let them know what they've been looking for, how do they equip this, how do you stand out within the organizations out there when you come in to apply. And so we are grateful that we have those types of opportunities available for students. And I think the universities, they are endeavoring. I think they're keeping up. They are working with the young people as much as they can, and we are trying our very best to be able to equip them to be ready. Last thing I would say, we constantly tell our young people, you are working for the generation that is above you, or maybe 2 generations above you. You may not work for your friends. And so if you're not working for your colleagues at the point in time, there may be some things that we have to learn to make sure that we can bridge those gaps and actually make sure we have good simulation between the generations that may have gone before you and who you are today. So I believe that the universities are coming, that we are listening to the workplaces, inquiries like this, you know, they open up ears for us to be able to understand what's happening there. And we keep listening and we keep answering and we keep readying the call, merch and food and speaking to them and, you know, people like informal activity, but the truth is generations and times are changing. And so we continue to keep talking, sharing our experiences, our knowledge to be able to equip them to be ready for the world of work that is also changing, and we have to keep up at all times.
Thank you so much. It sounds as though the University of the Southern Caribbean has a model program, and we will pay attention and learn from each other. I believe Member Roberts-Radgman had a follow-up question, and then I have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, and it's actually in relation to the USC model. Have you, based on the experiences that you have with the private sector, reaching out for recommendations for students, well, potential employees, have you seen over, I can't really pinpoint a period, but over time, have you seen a change in the soft skills that they're requiring as, I guess, the workplace changes? Or is it the same kinds of soft skills that you've seen from maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago?
I would say it's similar. I would say it's similar. But I think what has changed is the generations have changed in terms of their interests and what they may be focusing on. So, social media now tailors what you look at. So each person can get tailored information that comes to them. So if this is your interest, what you may view on social media, what content comes up may be tailored to you. So what you find sometimes is not all persons within a generation or within probably a particular age group or in a geographic region may have the same types of interests, the same things they were to focus on, even though they may be in the same generation. So the employers are saying we want similar, but I can see, even let's say from my office, in the office of the dean. So we have student workers that will work within our office while they're here in their programs. And you can see the changes. Some things that I took for granted 10 years ago, I'm in academia over 15 years. I have to tell them now. They're not necessarily thinking about it naturally. And I would think, I would have not thought in my age that I would come to an office and sing out loud while the workday is going on and just walk around the office singing. I would have never thought to do that in my age, but now I have to remind a young person, you know what, that may not be appropriate at this point in time. Maybe you may want to do it. A young person will tell you, I cannot do work unless I have my headphones in my ears continuously. Things that I would not have thought of while I was 10 years ago. I would not have thought to ask a young person, maybe if you have headsets in your ears, you may not be able to hear the instruction of somebody speaking to you at the time, or you may not be paying attention. But they say, you know what, this helps me do work very well. I concentrate better, I'm calmer when I'm able to do it. And so now you see the adjustment. Now I have to understand. Some of my colleagues say, what do you mean you have to have a headset in your ears while you're working all throughout the day? And they say it keeps me calm. I actually respond better. I'm more positive during the day. I feel more pleasant if I have my headset in my ears all day. Now, as an employer, I have to say, I could understand. That might make sense if it doesn't distract from what you're doing and you can keep up. So I see the adjustments on both sides. But generally speaking, the soft skills continue to be consistent in terms of what are required. But it means that sometimes young people may not be as cognizant, typically maybe because of their experiences. And so sometimes you have to have the communication between both sides to be able to have a happy medium in the workplace.
Thank you. What I've heard from the youth organizations is that you want clarity. You want the employers to communicate to you exactly what the requirements are. So it is two-way, and just as you're saying, what was obvious to you or the generation before 10 years ago may not be obvious. So if there's just clear communication from the employer side, that would also facilitate the youth side to adapt. Now, I wanted to move on because we've been talking about students who actually enrolled in programs. But to the youth organizations, there's a submission from the UWI Guild of Students that says that the committee must consider the growing population of youth not in employment, education, or training, which is referred to as NEET. And while local NEET rates have reportedly decreased to 14.4%, this still represents a significant portion of young people entirely disconnected from the labor market. So my question is to the youth organizations, what recommendations would you propose to address the NEET crisis in Trinidad and Tobago? Sorry, starting with the UW Guild of Students who made the submission.
Right. Through you, Madam Chair. 3 things. First, measure them properly. The 14.4% of NEET is derived from survey methodology with known limitations in capturing youth who have fully withdrawn from both the labor market and the educational system. Secondly, create a dedicated re-engagement pathway. We have organizations such as the OJT program and YTEP, but NEET youth are not served by those platforms because both require self-initiation. A dedicated outreach unit operating through community centers, religious institutions, and civil society organizations would be necessary to reach them where they are. And lastly, offer a financial bridge. Stipends conditional on completing certified micro courses in resilient sectors provide both immediate material support and a structured pathway back into the labor market. So that is those are my recommendations.
Thank you. Any comment from youth ambassadors?
No, not at this point in time.
Trinidad Youth Council.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Thank you again, member, for the question. Essentially, if a young person is not registered in any of the sectors that we mentioned before, coined as NEET, it means that at the very start, we have to evaluate why that young person doesn't see any value in any of these areas. So it starts, and I mean, you'll find me saying this a lot, because when you're working in the youth space, you see things differently, you see them at the root. So when young people feel discouraged over time from applying and perhaps trying to fit themselves into an industry where there's no space for them, there's a level of discouragement that takes place, and that causes young people to withdraw. So when we invite young people and say, come on to this program, the next question is, to what end? Is there a job for me? So we find more and more young people finding peace in the fact that they prefer that their lack of effort bears no fruit versus all of this effort and the result is the same. So what I would recommend as a starting point is, coming from a youth organization point of view, we are on the ground and we interact with young people in various spaces all the time. And one of the key things that we like to do is have initiatives that bring young people to the issue, or at least discuss the issue with them in a space, maybe virtually, however we decide to approach it. What is lacking within the space is that tripartite representation, where we have young people being able to liaise with ministries and the private sector to have a conversation about what is really taking place. Where is this disconnect happening where young people feel the need to withdraw and to not be active members of society? So it starts there. It comes down to finding out from the young people themselves what the issues are. A second thing that I would advocate for is the fact that a lot of young people feel like there's no recourse, or no redress for them when they feel discrimination or if they feel as though they are vulnerable within the workspace. And that lack of recourse also again feeds into that discouragement where young people withdraw themselves from any of these programs that are available to them. So it all starts from looking at the point of view of a young person, whether or not these programs are yielding fruit for them and whether or not the pull factors of these programs are good enough to compete with the other pull factors of activities that we do not want young people to be involved in. So what I would recommend is that at the state level, that young people are involved in that conversation when it comes down to developing these programs for them. Because these organizations tell young people what they need and what they think that we need without that consultation and without that steady body or person on a board or as a consultant. I mean, I'm using consultant loosely, but just as a resource to guide policy. So it starts by recognizing the youth voice, understanding their issues, why it's taking place, and reshaping that entire conversation from young people don't want to do anything, but why. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Nakhid.
Just as you mentioned, withdrawing, feeling a sense of withdrawal and all of that. This is for anybody. What do you all consider the state of mental health of this generation? And all these problems that we seem to encounter. How are we addressing that? State of mental health. I know it's a very broad-based question, but I know you can handle it.
Madam.
Sorry, maybe, yes, Ms. Baker, you can answer, and then we will engage Mr. Joe Field.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chair, and through you. Mental health in this generation is actually perceived quite differently. It's an open conversation. It's no longer looked at as a taboo conversation. So even on TikTok, and I'll use TikTok because that is a platform that we all navigate, whether we'd like to admit it or not. So on TikTok, you find that young professionals who have been trained in the field have now taken their advice and their guidance to TikTok. And it has opened up a whole new world of conversation concerning mental health. And even if we take social media out of it, looking at the new ways that young people are having conversations about mental health, it's okay to let someone know that you're going through something, because social media, and just by far globalization, has connected the world in such a way that more and more young people feel seen because people are able to justify their experience through their own examples online or in person. So mental health is definitely open in this generation. More and more people are talking about it, and more young people are finding terms to categorize the way that they feel within the workplace. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, do all these universities that we have here represented and the youth organizations, do we have things in place to address mental health? Do we have psychologists, psychiatrists? Do we have all of these things in place?
Any particular person you want to address? The student support.
Because I'm aware of the, there's some.
Yeah, because I know.
On a former committee, there were some abysmal rates as far as how many psychologists we had within the school system and university system. I wonder if there's been some improvement and so.
Okay, from the University of the Southern Caribbean, we have our on-site counselor. We have our Dean of Men and Dean of Women who acts as counselors as well for our students who reside on dorm. We have recognized that faculty members are one of those group of persons who actually listen to our students. Students would say, you lecturers are different. We see more than just coming to the classroom and teaching, because you will have students who you would recognize in your class, they're not functioning. They come to class and they leave. And for us as faculty, we would reach out to these students and we said, hey, we recognize that you weren't yourself today. What is happening? So we've recognized that we cannot just be faculty members and just come and lecture and leave. We have to think of our students and where they are, and we tend to meet our students where they are. A colleague of mine shared with me that a student was in the class sitting her midterm exam, and she just folded her paper, packed up her stuff, and left. And she left behind the student and said, what is happening? And she found the student crying. She said, I can't do this. I can't do this. And she said, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to go back to the dorm. You need to rest. You need to sleep. Speak to the dean. Have a conversation with her. If not, come back to me and we'll figure out what is happening. And it's safe to say that the student was deciding to leave the university because of whatever issue she was having. And because of the intervention of a faculty member, she actually stayed through to completion. So we have to see ourselves, while we are staff, while we are faculty members, we also have to be mindful that our students are people too, and they experience situation, and we reach out to them and assist where possible. So we don't leave it to our guidance counselors alone or the Dean of Men. We intervene where it is necessary.
Thank you. But that still refers to students who actually enrolled in a program. And just going back to the question about the NEET crisis, I think that there's still a significant amount of stigmatization attached to mental health or mental illness. So even though the TikTok generation may have greater help, I think generally there's stigmatization of mental health. So I agree that needs to be addressed. But I wanted to get Mr. Jofield's opinion on the NEET crisis.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would look at it from a different angle back in my capacity, my professional capacity again. I note previous remarks on how do we ensure that young people feel safe to access these opportunities, because we were speaking about them giving up and not feeling the need or seeing the or wanting to be a part of these opportunities that would help them to develop and give them employment and so on. So we have the Man Up program and the Leadership Legacy program in the Ministry of Culture and Community Development. And what we've realized over time is every year our applications become more and more and more and more. And that is because of success stories. You see young people come through these programs, and those who are not kept on by employers, when we place them to be employed, either start their own businesses. I know specifically for the Leadership and Man Up program, we focus mainly for Man Up on tech vox skills. So we look for persons who feel like society would have failed them. They went through school, they failed, and they have some sort of skill. Because we believe that everybody has a skill to hone on, and so we teach them the different sort of skills, as well as have them go through learning different tech vox skills. We teach them entrepreneurship, as opposed to the leadership. We deal with more handicraft skills, so hair, nails, all these different stuff. All with the mindset of creating either future employees or entrepreneurs. And because of this, we see success stories, and we push these success stories, so more persons that fall into the NEET category tend to apply. So every year we realize that the applications become more and more and more. What I will say, as we seek to reduce this percentage from, I think it was 14.4 that a colleague would have mentioned before, that the government look to the expansion of these programs, because they are bearing fruit. There are the many success stories that deal with persons who once fell under the NEET category, but we are only able at this point in time to accommodate just a certain amount, a handful, across Trinidad and Tobago. So as I said before, I look at it from a different standpoint, being somebody who is in a direct line of contact with these persons. And yes, you hear the stories of them feeling that they were cheated by life and cheated by society and so on. But I think all they need really and truly is that hope and someone genuinely to hold their hand and guide them. And the follow-up. The follow-up is also very critical, because after you would have impacted them and given them all this knowledge and equipped them for life, you want to ensure, because that's the most critical part. Being in your presence for 3 or to 6 months is one thing, but being out of your presence and actually utilizing what we would have impacted them with is what really makes a difference. And we have seen an impact. But as I said before, it's only for a handful based on how much we can accommodate. So I think a recommendation coming from myself as General Secretary of the Tobago Youth Council would be expanding these programs. And I know that there are other initiatives in different ministries that do same. Thank you very much.
This might be a bit more targeted. How many qualified, medically qualified psychologists we have at UTT in the area of mental support at UTT, at UE? How many do we have? Not teachers, faculty acting as counselors and so on.
Madam Chair, through you, at UTT we have 4.
4?
Yeah. Sure, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm counting mentally now. We do have counselors attached to faculties. I want to hazard a guess. I'll get the exact number back to you. But within the faculties, we have counselors. We also have our counseling and psychological service, where we have around 4 or 5 counselors. Our health services unit also has a psychiatrist there, so he can attend to students. We also do train peer advisors. All our RAs are trained to exist on the hall to offer first level, not clinical counseling, but to recognize. Our counselor goes into the faculties as well and facilitates sessions for faculties on recognizing students in distress. We also facilitate a co-curricular course called Mind the Gap, where our students can come in and they can be trained as well. But with Mind the Gap, it's not just for inclusion on faculty. It's to encourage the students, if in their community, if they're in home, they see someone in distress, this is the protocol, this is what you can do. And through our community engagement unit, we also partner with the Mind the Gap program. And so the Mind the Gap program, across the national landscape, they train young people to facilitate interventions in their community. So we do have a multifaceted approach, I can get back to you the details of the exact number of trained psychologists, but we continue, resources permitting. We understand what that means. We have seen the increase in mental health post-COVID, and we understand what that means for us as individuals, for an institution, but also as a nation. And it's something that's really on the front burner for us. We continue to work at it and provide interventions as much as possible.
Madam Chair, through you, and just following up on Member Nakhid's question, I don't know if it was raised in any of the issue papers, but apart from mental health, what is the general tertiary education's position as it pertains to anti-bullying? Because I think we as a country think that this is something that is only tethered to secondary and primary schools. But I know for a fact that it occurs in the workplace, and I suspect that it definitely occurs at tertiary education institutions. So if any of you can indicate what provisions you all have put in place to treat with that, I think it would go a long way in assisting.
Madam Chair, through you. So, of course, we have a non-tolerance approach with respect to bullying. It's governed by our academic regulations, so it's usually addressed through student misconduct if it rises to that level. We also have policy on it explicitly prohibiting such behavior. And we generally try, as part of education in terms of how we orient students, to raise the issue. Yeah.
I do not know that we have an explicit policy, but we are guided by our student code of conduct. And so we do have a zero tolerance for bullying, both on campus, and of course we hope that it will be infused into the community. But also, as we are speaking about workplace and workplace transition, we do facilitate as part of our World of Work sessions. That's a discussion that we definitely must have. And so because of our partnership with industry, they facilitate as part of their sessions, just that discussion on workplace bullying as well. And to understand that, of course, each institution, each organization will deal with it differently, but just that sensitization to know that there should be a policy. And if there isn't, what recourse do you have if you encounter it? And also to know as well that, it's zero tolerance nationally, but just to sensitize students that, as you said, it's not a secondary school or primary school issue. It's not a higher ed issue, but it's a national issue. And so we should, as nationals, all of us, have a zero tolerance for bullying wherever we see it and wherever it occurs.
I appreciate the responses that I've gotten thus far, but I really, and I applaud you all for what you all have been doing thus far, but I really want to hear from the students, so the president of the Guild of Students, the Trinidad and Tobago Youth ambassadors. What are your experiences when you encounter situations like that with classmates and other students, and bringing those things to the attention of the administration? What have they done to treat with those issues?
Okay, Sherri-Lyn from Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors. Now, from my experience while going to school, bullying was something that was so on social media, meaning they would drag one, a simple thing as a project, one would have to do sharing my personal experience. They would call it, they would say that the image, it was a character, it looks like someone. And from that experience therein, Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors, we kind of have this safe space that I would say, where we would now create a room, a platform for persons to share their own opinions and share their experiences. And this would now allow us to kind of get an insight as to what is actually going on within these schools. Because I mean, you're coming from an organization, a non-government, a non-profit organization, government-assisted organization. So getting that experience from them, hearing them with these experiences, we decided to now, with something that's coming, to launch a campaign of awareness, mental health awareness, as one of the members was saying. So we would assist them and educate them on things that they may be going through, whether it be anxiety or depression or stress management, ways to cope in which they would be going through these things at their respective school. Yeah?
Right. Through you, Madam Chair. So when we look at the university system within the University of the West Indies and the Guild of Students and so on, instead of generalizing bullying, we could look at the different types of bullying. You have cyberbullying, you have harassment, you have hazing. Now, I wouldn't say that the University of the West Indies or the halls surrounding campus has a strong hazing culture. There are different types of initiations, student events, things like that. But when it comes to bullying,
but for our knowledge, hazing, I'm a dinosaur as well.
right.
So could you just define what hazing is? I'm
you're
not
familiar with like fraternities and so on for foreign universities. So hazing would be essentially bullying, what we would call bullying, just at a tertiary institution. So we don't have things like that happening on halls, to my knowledge. However, isolated situations of bullying, whether it be cyberbullying, harassment, there exist policies within the Code of Conduct for students. There exists a sexual harassment policy for the university. We have appointed sexual harassment advisors. So on the Guild of Students, we have a gender affairs officer, a gender affairs office. There are safe spaces for students to come to when in regards to, how to say, being demeaned or if they're facing situations where they feel as though they're being bullied or being targeted. I think a major situation we have, however, is cyberbullying. Just in the 22nd National Youth Parliament, as the Speaker of the House, we debated cyberbullying. It's a significant issue. Some students, when it comes to an emotional standpoint, everyone is at different levels of emotional maturity. There are certain things some people may see as fun and games. Others may see it as targeted. Others may see it as disrespectful. So a simple thing like a sticker on a WhatsApp group could be very, very disrespectful and hurtful to some people, while to other students it may seem as playful. So identifying these things, it requires, how to say, a unbiased opinion. In the Guild of Students, we have student leaders who are trained in, as Dr. Lewis would have stated, peer counseling. There exists the CAPS, which is the Psychological Services Unit within the university. We have the campus psychiatrist. These services exist for students to rely on. Whether or not they are marketed enough, I would say many students are unaware that these services exist. It is my intention to change that, however. When it comes to transitioning to the world of work, though, it may seem as though, in the workplace, if you are feeling as though as a junior employee, you're being targeted by a senior employee, I would say many students who have worked in internships may feel as though the HR department wasn't necessarily on their side. They would feel as though the HR department exists to serve the organization instead of the individual employee. That is something we need to look at. Right now, I don't have the data to rely upon to make any certain recommendations, but I do think it's something that needs looking into.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch earlier had mentioned that she thinks that work readiness should begin at a secondary school level. So that, in preparation for the world of work, I'm interested to know if the other youth organizations agree with this position, or if do you have anything else to add to when work readiness should begin for the student population. Sorry, we could ask the Trinidad Youth Council to comment and then Tobago.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'll defer this question to our trustee, Mr. Kendall Vincent.
Through you, Madam Chair, once again, thanks for the opportunity. So the Trinidad Youth Council position, being that broad-based umbrella organization for youth organizations, we definitely would agree with one of our member organizations being that of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors. And that position that we feel like, those interventions need to happen at an earlier stage. However, I don't want us to fly under the radar is that we keep on, we talk about underemployment, we keep on going back into those traditional systems, schools. I think we also need to look at how do we engage, because there are, based on, my lived experiences and being actively engaged on the ground, there is still communities, there are still young people that do not have the necessary means to. It's not that they may not want to go into a school. There are still, even if we look at the social media, we still see, I see recently parents are still having difficulties getting children into the school system. I think also one of the things that we also have to also look at in terms of our engagement, there are students that may be academically, they may have behavioral issues or challenges. I know the ministry has a system in place in some cases where they send them to the police youth clubs or so, who assist with whether they get into disciplinary issues and they go off to the police youth clubs, so like being suspended or out of school. So I feel like there have to be a series of like different interventions, not just workplace readiness, but however, I would say, particularly as it relates to those students who, somewhere in terms of connecting the dots, those students who have behavioral challenges, I would say in schools, not letting them like just kind of fly under, they suspended, they expelled in some cases. I recall an interaction or an engagement with, I think it was not White, but one of those schools where they send them off to the school. The student may not be able to, they send them off to one of these programs. They were expelled from the traditional school system, but they are in an environment with young people that may be slower, not at the same rate with them, so they disengage. So in terms of how do we engage, but that engagement may also look at visual and performing arts, the tech work, different areas of, I would say, not just resource skills, but looking at how do we strengthen, whether it be sports, there are other opportunities and not just defining success as, the traditional route. So that would be my sort of intervention here.
Thank you. So we must remember that we have to engage children who may not actually be in the school system as well. I understand. Did anybody else from the youth organizations want to add to that point? Okay, if yes, go ahead, please.
To answer the question, yes, I agree, and I draw reference back to the YES program, which is a department within the Tobago House of Assembly that has already been doing that work in Tobago. So I have to say I wholeheartedly agree that it needs to start at the secondary school level, also agreeing with my colleague who spoke before me, that it needs to be more than just soft skills. But it has been bearing fruit in Tobago, so I know for a fact that if it is done nationally, whether it be creating a department like the YES program for schools in Trinidad and not just schools, but yes, program goes into communities and partners with the community councils and so on to bring these type of services and trainings to person to make them more equipped, more employable, and all of these kind of things. It will reap benefits for Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll have one more follow-up question from Member Roberts-Radgman, and then we want to discuss the undergraduate tracer studies.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, Tobago Youth Council just kind of segued into it, given the example of the success of the YES program implemented by the Tobago House of Assembly. But in the TYC submission, they had indicated that a lot of participants have concerns about prospects for when they participate in programs like YES, I'm imagining, and longer-term programs like the OJT program. They have concerns about the size of the stipend or the remuneration that they receive, and then, of course, long-term outcomes in terms of being able to get long-term employment afterwards, placements, that sort of thing. and even placements that don't necessarily align with their qualifications. Given that, and it's open to anybody, but I guess we'd start with the Tobago Youth Council because he just indicated the success of the programs like the YES program. And given that all the youth entities are identifying the importance, the value brought by these programs, how do you then consolidate the effectiveness of those programs against participants being concerned about these kinds of things that you've identified here? So your stipends, long-term prospects, that sort of stuff.
It pertains to these issues that participants would have made mention of, specifically for the stipend. I think it would be unfair to speak to the amount given in the stipend, because at the end of the day, these programs target persons who are in school, whether it be secondary level or tertiary level, right? I think one of the issues that, or the main issue as it pertains to the stipend is that of the timely disbursement of the stipend. So I think that is something that falls upon the THA and the various departments to deal with. That is specifically for the THA. As it pertains to the availability of specific employment areas, as I stated before, that is something that is ongoing in Tobago, mainly because of our limited sectorial availability. So yes, as it pertains to it in Trinidad. So in Trinidad, someone might want to do a job or venture into a career through one of the internship programs, and they would more than likely have about 10 different options as opposed to one or none in Tobago. Because as I said before, Tobago has limited private sector and mainly deal with the public sector. But what we've realized is an influx of persons who have interest in private sector related industries. So Tobago, I would be lying to come up here and say, well, this should be affixed to it and that should be affixed to it. I think right now one of the main things that we should be looking at to deal with is expanding our private sector in Tobago, which would then deal with that whole issue of placement and into selective fields. Yeah, that expansion of those options for persons in Tobago. I hope that answers the question, member.
Okay, thank you so much. With regard to the time and anticipating a 12:30 finish, I just wanted to move into something of interest, which is the tracer studies, which we will address to the 3 tertiary education institutions before we wrap up.
Thank you very much, Chair. The University of the West Indies, in their submission about tracer studies, indicated that 57.9% of employed respondents reported that their jobs were aligned with their degrees in 2023. And so my question is this: for all 3 tertiary institutions, how recent would you have done a tracer study, and does it impact on your curriculum review? Because if only 57.9% of those employed respondents indicated that their degrees are aligned with their jobs, you know, when you go through your accreditation process and you talk about fitness for purpose, so if each one of the tertiary institutions could indicate their recent tracer studies. And
can we start with the University of the West Indies to answer that question, and then UTT and then USC? Thank you.
Chair, through you, I would like to invite my colleague from our Campus Office of Planning and Institutional Research.
Thank you, Chair, through you. We conduct tracer studies between 12 and 18 months following the graduating class. And so this, as a methodological choice, is to allow the graduate time to actually realize some graduate outcomes. We are aware that the recruitment processes can be drawn out in certain instances. So we want to give the graduate time to actually get a job and realize some graduate outcomes before we actually survey them. And so to that extent, we currently are in the data analysis phase for our 24 graduate tracer study. and that report will be released before the end of this year, because data collection is open for approximately 3 months, launching usually at the end of the year, and then following during the data collection process, there's also a concurrent process where we collect qualitative data to also support the quantitative data being collected. To address your concern about the perceived mismatch with graduates' field of study and the jobs that they go into, we do acknowledge that there is a mismatch, yes, and we can even see that further in certain areas of underemployment that we do measure, specifically skills mismatch underemployment, and we did note that in our report as well. The information from our graduate tracers, and I must say that the University of the West Indies has been conducting graduate tracers since the 2010 graduating class consistently, and it's an annual venture. That information is shared with all faculties, with Board of Undergraduate Studies in their approval and development process for curriculum. It is shared with SETTLE. It is shared with the Careers Office that works quite closely with us. We share it also through our marketing office in general to the wider public. It's also published on the website of our Campus Office of Planning and Institutional Research. So we try our best to get the information out there so that it is information that they will use, and we expect and endorse that they use that information within curriculum development and review.
How long after your tracer study, how long does it take for you to align that with the curriculum? If you find that the data informs that your curriculum needs to change, how long to connect that, to match that, to align, put things in alignment?
Through you, Chair. Certain programs have varying review schedules for the curriculum, so sometimes they align quite quickly based on the review schedule for that particular program. In other instances, admittedly, it would be a longer process. For instance, if a review would have just taken place and a new tracer came out within the later portion of that year, then they will make the decision to address if the result is significant enough to trigger that type of immediate review, so they would call special meetings or so. If not, they will table it for the already scheduled review that is in process, because the reviews go through our SETTLE office and they conduct reviews for all of our programs, courses. We have hundreds of programs. And so that varies, to answer your question.
Thank you. University of the Southern Caribbean.
Thank you. We have not conducted an official tracer study for institutional-wise, but we've done tracer study for particular programs, such as our nursing programs or education programs, just to see where our students are, where they may be employed, and how best they're fitting into their world of work as they enter, say, for instance, our nursing students. We complete a graduate exit survey every year, and as indicated by my colleague, as of the third year of program, students are already employed. So our last graduation exit survey, which was completed in 2025, 57% of our students were already employed in their respective fields. So there are plans for this year to roll out our first tracer study for the entire institution, but we have been doing studies for our nursing program, our education program, and our graduate exit surveys. In terms of aligning or if there are any significant gaps, we too go through a process of review of our programs, and there is a set schedule for them. So again, when the program is being reviewed, these items are implemented, and of course they have to go in alignment with the accreditation agencies, ensuring that we keep the credit limits where they ought to be for GATE funding requirements, and we add to our programs the skill areas that may be lacking. Not sure if my colleague wants to add anything. Through you, Chair.
Yes, certainly. And of course, it's a multi-pronged process. So as we mentioned earlier, we want to also know if the graduates are lining up in terms of their fields of study and, of course, the world of work. And then we also have to hear from the employers directly what they require as well. So you want a multi-pronged approach to how you actually address your curriculum. And so we listen to both sides of the fence. I think at the University of the Southern Caribbean, as my colleague mentioned, we do have the program tracer studies, but we also spend a lot of time engaging with the private sector as well to be able to understand what the needs are, what the skills are required, and so we factor that into our program reviews as well. And as mentioned earlier, at least I can speak for the School of Business, we've just entered a whole new course that speaks to readiness that our employers have indicated to us. So we gather the data from them directly, and then we try to get the students ready for what the industry would need. So we're doing it from a multi-pronged process. First of all, the students and their matching of skill sets, and then the employers are well saying, these are the skill sets that we need. How can you factor it into your curriculum as well?
Thank you, University of Trinidad and Tobago.
Madam Chair, through you, we conduct a graduate survey similar to our colleagues at UE, approximately 12 to 18 months after each class. So we actually, as well, compiling the data for the 2024 cohort. So we've been doing this since maybe 2012. In terms of your question, through you, Chair, from the member, on the responsiveness with respect to curriculum development and revision, the results from a tracer study in any one particular year isn't sufficient to trigger a revision of the curriculum. But we have a process within the university where programs are on a cycle for review, and that involves data from tracers, but also feedback from industry, because each program has an industry advisory board that provides information as well as engagement with employers and those kinds of things. So the curriculum review process is more extensive and it's cyclical in nature. Also, the process in terms of collecting data from the surveys after graduates have gone out for about a year and a half, really, with any one particular cohort, just gives you a snapshot. We haven't, for a few years now, since just immediately before COVID, conducted a longitudinal study where we look at a group of graduates over several cohorts for an extended period of time to see what emerges there. But what we do continually is apply the survey to the cohort around 12 to 18 months. Unlike our colleagues at UWI, our data suggests that maybe about 79% of them are actually, who are employed, are working in areas related to their program. And that might be because the suite of UTT programs are more directly aligned to specific sectors.
Thank you so much. Just one final question. Many of these tracer studies have low response rates. Could you give any strategies that you're thinking about to improve the response rates and therefore have more relevant data? Perhaps the UTT, and I know for a fact USC, your response rate was very low.
Okay, through you, Chair. As indicated before, we have not done an institutional tracer study. One of the things that we have aggressively embarked on is our alumni database. And what we have done is attach incentives to registration for our alumni database. That will give us ready data, clean data. So while they may have left and they have been using, say, for instance, their university email address, with the drive for the collection of our alumni data, we request for alternative email addresses, we request for their current area of work and their current employer information. So that has been something that we've been doing for the past 6 months. So with that data coming in, we would be able to have a more current batch of information that will allow our response rate to increase.
Thanks, I understand. So having a correct contact email. And Mr. Stafford, I heard that word incentives again.
Yes, Madam Chair. In earlier times, we provided some incentives to improve our response rate, but in the economic conditions, we can't. However, I wouldn't necessarily describe our response rate as extremely low. On average, UTT produces about 1,300 graduates annually, and usually we get a response rate of just under 40%, which by industry standards is, for these kinds of things, is not low. Yeah. Ideally, we would like to have a much higher response rate too.
Fair enough. And UWI, your response rate?
Yes, through you, Chair. Our response rate within recent years tends to hover around 30%, which, as the colleague from UTT, between 30 to 40% is your industry standard for institutional research. Now, I still think that that can be improved. My office and me specifically is the one responsible with the mandate for carrying out graduate tracer studies. We do these for our undergraduate student population. We do it for postgraduate graduates as well, including those of research degrees. I would love to get feedback from all of our graduates. That would be my personal goal and in some cases pipe dream, because it's very tough to get the response back. I have personally employed the following initiatives and approaches to improving our response rate. We send the emails to their personal emails. We had permission to do that, so not using their university registered emails. Admittedly, as students, sometimes they don't often check it while enrolled as an active student, and so we do send it to their personal emails. We utilize our business intelligence system, which collects both the student personal email from their registration and updates that information periodically, so we do send it to their personal emails. We work very closely with the faculties, and in the past we've also worked with the Guild. And we work with the faculties to outreach, particularly with their alumni databases that they would have built within faculty. So when I send out the survey, we then generate a separate link, have that link sent out by each faculty office so that we're hoping to reach their alumni even closer. We do also put it openly on our website during that point in time with a jot form. We're utilizing a jot form where they would submit in their information saying that, you know, I've seen this particular thing, but it's not really coming to my email address, so therefore this is my updated information, and I send periodic updates. We send reminders. We try not to bother them because we don't want to create survey burden, but we do send reminders, a number of reminders throughout the process. I've also instituted a longer open time for the survey, where typical surveys are open for 3 to 4 weeks. Our survey is open for 3 months to allow persons to take their time and respond. We've ensured that the questions are not too long, the survey is not too overbearing. We've looked at the timing of the activity itself. We've tried launching the survey in the past times around Carnival, are definite no-nos. Sometimes during the summer, it's really hard to reach persons. They've checked out, they're on vacation, so they've checked out of checking their email. We find that just that sweet spot just before Christmas, when persons are still in office and there's a little bit of lag in a work schedule, is possibly giving us the best. And we also have incentives. We do employ incentives for our surveys. We have a random prize draw. We even go to the faculties in certain instances to give gift cards, for book vouchers, for Amazon gift cards. So we have been trying, and we will continue to try to drive that number up, because as I mentioned earlier, we collect quantitative and qualitative information, and that qualitative feedback is really, and has been super essential in helping us to shape a lot of our programs, including those from careers and soft skill development, and helping us to lobby for increased access to internships and practical employment opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, it's 12:28, so I'm going to... so we're going to have just one question from member Ameen, and then we will try to wrap up.
Chair, thank you so much, Chair. I'll be very brief. Now, one of the concerns about the employability of young people is not just their academic qualifications, their mental and emotional suitability to employment to follow instructions, to take initiative, to work within the parameters that they are given. Given that we have more awareness of mental health issues, many of these young people went through COVID, a time when you were so withdrawn from everything. And that ability to work, not just your academic qualifications, it is a current issue. Do the universities or do our friends who represent our various youth organizations, have you taken active consideration in those life skills that will make a person more employable or more likely to stay on the job? There are young people who you employ them and after a while they get overwhelmed and they're gone, And then they complain that they can't get a job, but they are not emotionally prepared for work. So have you had that as part of your consideration in your programs to help youth employability?
Okay, we addressed that briefly. So we addressed that, in depth. So maybe very briefly we could give an overview, starting with the tertiary institutions. USC gave an answer, but maybe UWI and UTT, and then we can wrap up.
Through you, Chair, through our careers and placement section, we do focus on rigorous soft skills training for students and competency development, creating that awareness, but also we do have a competency tracker, which is industry standard globally, where our students can track where they are, whether it's their first year, their second year, wherever they are, there's a rubric. And so they can track where they are and they can measure their improvement over time. And just to keep it short, once they think they are, let's say, a level 4, level 5, someone in industry, someone with an internship, a faculty member, someone in the community can actually validate that they do believe that this student exerts this competency. And so it makes it really easy for our students when they are transitioning, that automatically will become a referee for them when they're applying for jobs. So just to keep it short, that's something that we have done.
Thank you so much. That's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. So on that note, we can now try to wrap up and invite brief closing comments from the chief officials present, starting with, on my right, USC, and then UWI, then UTT, followed by the UWI Guild, the ambassadors, youth ambassadors, and then the Trinidad Youth Council and the Tobago Youth Council. Thank you. Just 1 minute, please.
Thank you. The university wishes to express thanks to the committee for the invitation to be here and to share our views on the underemployment and unemployment of youths in Trinidad and Tobago. We see this as a significant step of allowing USC to participate in such activities, and that what we've learned from this situation and this committee discussion, we would be able to bring it back to our university and apply it to our functions and how we carry out our evaluation of our programs, and to ensure that we add some more soft skills, we add some more, we get on the ball with our tracer study, and to ensure that what our graduates are replica of what Trinidad and Tobago wishes to see in the job market. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the University of the West Indies, I wish to again thank the committee for the opportunity to contribute to this very important inquiry into youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago. We commend the Joint Select Committee for taking a broad and harmonized approach to this issue, one that recognizes the importance of bringing together perspectives of the state, industry, educational institutions, and the young persons themselves. The UWI St. Augustine remains enthusiastic and willing in this effort, and we welcome continued collaboration with the committee, government agencies, industry partners, and other stakeholders to help improve graduate transition, reduce underemployment and unemployment, and support national human capital development. Thanks very much.
Madam Chair, on behalf of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, we'd like to express our thanks to the Joint Select Committee for inviting us to be part of this very important conversation. The approach and the multi-pronged invitee list has definitely assisted in bringing some important issues to bear. UTT, as a national university, continues to look forward to opportunities to collaborate as we look towards improving and addressing our national priorities, especially issues as important as youth unemployment and underemployment. So thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, on behalf of the University of the West Indies Guild of Students, we wish to express our sincerest gratitude for being invited to expound on the submission made and contribute to this timely and important investigation into youth unemployment and underemployment. We look forward to seeing what this yields, and any request for clarification or supplementary data is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and esteemed members of the Joint Select Committee for affording us, the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Ambassadors Program, this marvelous opportunity to contribute to this important national discussion. We sincerely appreciate the committee's commitment to engaging young people in conversations surrounding youth unemployment and underemployment. And if we are serious, yes, we would be addressing the youth unemployment and underemployment in Trinidad and Tobago by collaborating, having that collaboration between government, educational institutions, employers, and youth organizations. So we must move forward and move beyond discussion and into measurable action. Once again, I say thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and to all of the members of the committee. What I will say is that the Trinidad Youth Council is grateful for the opportunity to share our thoughts on these matters. We hope that the committee would consider perhaps receiving submissions from the Public Service Commission, where a lot of young people would like to see permanent employment come out of that through that means. And we do hope that maybe in the future there may be murmurings of a National Youth Advisory Council, who knows, maybe to direct these issues at the root. So we say thank you, and we hope that these conversations will yield a report that has recommendations that are tangible and where we will see the fruit of that. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You'll be pleased to know that the service commissions will be witnesses at the next hearing. And we will end, of course, never to forget Tobago. Looking forward to your closing comments.
Madam Chair, and to members of the committee, the Tobago Youth Council wishes to sincerely thank the members of the Joint Select Committee for the meaningful and productive discussions held this morning. We are grateful for the opportunity to contribute to this important national conversation and to share perspectives and experiences of young people in Tobago. Today's engagement demonstrates a genuine commitment to understanding the realities facing our nation's youth and identifying practical solutions that can create greater opportunities for sustainable employment, empowerment, and development. We also wish to commend the committee for the work being undertaken in examining these matters with seriousness and purpose. The Tobago Youth Council remains committed to continued collaboration and dialogue with all stakeholders as we collectively work towards building a more inclusive, accessible, and opportunity-driven future for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. Thank you very much, and may God continue to bless all of you.
Okay, thank you to everyone for those closing comments. Finally, the public is advised that this committee recently presented the following report to the House of Representatives and the Senate: a special report on an inquiry into Trinidad and Tobago's response to the prevalence of non-communicable diseases with a focus on diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and cancer. You can access and review this very insightful report on the Parliament's website, ttparliament.org. Thank you to officials of the various organizations for your attendance and contributions, to committee members for your support and participation, and to the staff of the Parliament for your procedural and logistical support. I now declare this meeting adjourned.